My name is Chris Edwards, and welcome to Safe Space, a show dedicated to people of Caribbean descent or of Caribbean backgrounds in the LGBTQIA plus community. This is a space for us in the community to share our stories, our journeys of how we've gotten to this place in our lives, how we've come out, or as I'd like to say, letting others in. Each journey is unique. Some of us have had challenges, while others of us have had a much easier road to travel. As I've journeyed through my life, I've recognized the power of representation and being seen. I wish when I was growing up, I saw more people like myself, people from the community, people who have walked the path that I'm currently traveling. My intent with this platform is to give people like myself, like you, the space to be seen and heard. I want to give our guests the opportunity to share with you their stories so that it might give you insight, hope, and courage to be your best self for yourself. I'll be asking this of my guests each and every week, but it wouldn't be fair if I didn't tell my story and how I got to this point in my life. If you'd asked me about 5 years ago, would I be talking about myself, my sexuality in a public way, on a public platform? I would have said you were crazy. I've come to realize that I was a very complex and compartmentalized individual. Not until I was on the other side of this journey, though, could I look back and recognize that about myself. But I'll get back to that. Let's start from the beginning. So, I was born in Jamaica in 1975. My entire family is from Jamaica. I come from a long line of Jamaican lineage. I grew up in a strong religious home, basically. And for those that are in the Caribbean community, you know what that actually entails and what that means. So I don't really have to explain that to you guys. I immigrated to the U.S. when I was about 3 years old with my mom and my brother at the time. And, I had a typical upbringing, but, puberty comes around, and then I knew that something was a little bit different with me. I felt a little bit different, but not, let me just kind of step back a little bit. I would say around the age of 8 is when I really noticed that I was a little bit different, as you would say. But I didn't have the words. I didn't have the vocabulary to articulate what that difference was and what it meant. I knew that I had something bubbling inside me that felt, I don't know, at the time, what I would call it was weird. But puberty comes around and, all the hormones are starting to rage, and, you don't know how to deal with those emotions, and you're looking at girls differently. But not only was I looking at girls, I was looking at boys. I found myself attracted to both sex. And as I stated earlier, I did not have the vocabulary to articulate what that really meant. And I know that it was different. I know that I didn't fit in with all the other kids, all right? I always had that feeling of awkwardness around my family, around my peers, and especially during family events, during the holidays. It was always very strange for me. And I think a lot of you other Caribbeans can attest, and actually it doesn't have to be Caribbean, but you can attest to when you get around family and friends, especially during the holidays, and they're talking and just having a good time. And of course, the subject of homosexuality comes up. It's something that's talked down and frowned upon. And I kind of understood what that meant, but I knew that it made me not feel comfortable. I would kind of retreat within myself. I would kind of just kind of go inwards and kind of shut down a little bit. And I didn't know how to deal with that. Sometimes I would just, sit there and listen, or sometimes I would remove myself altogether and go into a different room and just not deal with it at all. One of the things I always asked myself, and this is like early teenage years going through like high school, was, can they tell? Can they see it on me? The fact that not only did I like girls, but I found an interest in boys as well. Did it show up and manifest itself in some way? And, my ultimate goal is just to keep it suppressed and keep it hidden so no one could ever find out. Especially growing up, going to church, hearing from the pulpit that, homosexuality is wrong. You're going to be condemned to a life of hell. You're never going to make it to heaven. That was something that struck fear into my heart and something I didn't want to deal with. So, like most people, you kind of suppress those feelings. You put them aside and you say that, I don't know why, I've been cursed, why I feel this way, and I shouldn't be feeling this way, and I don't want to feel this way. So I'm going to do everything in my power to just like suppress it and push it down. That can be very traumatic. And then, little did I know that that was just the beginning of a lot of hurt and pain that I would experience throughout my life because of those repressed and suppressed feelings. Fast forward, high school was rough. I dated, like, as you would say, normal, regular. I had girlfriends, went to prom. I went to 2 proms, as a matter of fact, with my current girlfriend at the time. Did all the things that, high school kids do, have all those experiences. But not until I went away to college did I really start to struggle. That first time being out in the world on your own, by yourself, having to just figure life out. Did I start to really look at myself and wonder what was going on with me and how was it going to deal with myself? College, is a unique experience for those that have had the opportunity to go, especially like to go away to school and to experience that, experience it on your own. I went to a very diverse university. We had everybody under the sun there. We had a very diverse LGBTQIA plus community. And, I wanted to be friends with a lot of those people because I could associate, but I couldn't. I couldn't because of fear of being found out for who I was. I wasn't truthful to myself. And because of that, I couldn't be truthful to others. I watched from afar. I did have quote unquote gay friends or people that are gay that I thought I was friends with. But I did not allow them in. That was like that hard line that I could just never, ever break. That was really, really difficult for me. And I'm sure it's difficult for a lot of people out there. So that was a rough time, and I went to school for 5 years because I have my degree in architecture, which is a 5-year program. And in the very beginning, I had a girlfriend for like the first 2 years, and I dated throughout my college years, but not until I got into like the last year of school, right before I graduated, and right after graduation is when I had my first same-sex experience. Now, I got into a relationship with a gentleman, and looking back at it, it wasn't the greatest relationship. I will say it taught me a lot. It taught me some of the things I shouldn't settle for. But I will say the relationship was hard. And it was hard because of the fact that the relationship was hidden. When you have to hide something, you're always doubling back and making sure that you've covered your tracks. No one knows, no one's supposed to find out. And that is exhausting. So just that alone made the relationship stressful, hard. And then on top of it, it was my first, like I said, gay relationship. I struggled with guilt. I struggled with shame. And I struggled with self-loathing. It was deep-seated. I know the experience of just being with this person, even though I thought at the time that I was in love, it wasn't. Every experience, every kiss, every embrace just came with shame and guilt afterwards. And I think that is another part of me not being able to progress to a relationship in a natural way, because I just had too hard of a time struggling with who I was as a person, who I was as a gay man, who I was as a bisexual man. And it's difficult. And I'm sure there are plenty of other people out there that have dealt with this, that are dealing with this. The one thing I want you to know is that you are not alone in dealing with it and feeling the way that you feel. Never be ashamed of who you are. And I know it's easy for me to say this now because I'm on the other side of it, but I wish I had the knowledge and the words that I have now to tell myself back then that, it's going to be okay. You're okay, and you can be who you are. Don't let anyone, society dictate that for you. From my mid-20s to 40s, I would say that I laid dormant. And what do you mean by that? I suppressed all the feelings, the sexual desires that I had. As I mentioned earlier, I truly distinguish myself, categorize myself, call myself, label myself a bisexual man. You'll say, "Oh, I've heard it all before. You're confused. You don't know which gender you like, or you just want to play both sides." No, I know that I am attracted to both sex, male and female. This is who I am. This is who I've always been, and this is who I fought, or what I fought against all my life. But laying dormant just meant that I just suppressed that one side of me. And I didn't realize how detrimental it was to me until I got to the other side of it. I continued to date. I had a few relationships, nothing too long. Maybe I think the longest of the time probably was maybe a year. And it wasn't because I was feeling guilty about not exploring the other half of my sexuality. It had a lot to do with I did not find that person I really wanted to be with. But subconsciously, I think that it had to do with not allowing myself to fully be who I am and express myself in the way that I could or I should. So during those 20 years, from like my mid-20s to my early 40s, I just worked hard. I traveled, I lived life, and I thought I was living an amazing life. I was fortunate enough to have a job where I could travel. I've been to some amazing destinations. I've been all around the world, done some amazing things, met some amazing people. And a lot of the people I still consider really close friends today. But the one thing I could not do was give myself completely to those people, because I was not being truthful with myself and I was not being truthful with them. So let's fast forward. Age 43, January 2019, I met somebody. And I met someone when I wasn't looking for anyone at all. I have resigned myself to the fact that I would just be single. I was happy with where I was in life. I was traveling. I was doing my photography. I was meeting some amazing people. I was having great experiences. And you know what? That's all I needed. I didn't need to be married, have kids, any of that stuff. So, wasn't looking. And it's funny because it's something that I remember as a youth in my early teens, my grandfather saying to me, you know what? Don't go out there looking for love. It will eventually find you one day. And I said, okay. And hold and behold, it did. It found me. I met this young man. His name is Ronald Clay. And little did I know how profoundly this person would change my life. It was a simple, innocent interaction on Instagram. I happened to be scrolling through my feed. Typically I have the sound off because I don't like to hear all the various sounds as I'm scrolling and liking stuff or whatever, or saving stuff. And I happened to come across his page and he happened to be singing something. Don't ask me what the song was because I really don't remember, because honestly, it wasn't even important. It was just the voice that I heard. And I remember I stopped and I listened, and I just sent him a quick message through DM. I said, hey, just wanted to say, you have an amazing voice. Keep practicing your instrument, and I wish you nothing but success, continued success in whatever you do, and make sure singing is a part of that. And to be honest with you, I was not expecting him to respond. And that's not something that I normally do anyway, like reach out to people's DMs. That was not my thing. So I just left a message and moved on. And like literally within like about a minute or so, I get a response back saying, oh, thank you so much. Singing is my passion, but I'm nervous and shy, and I just trying to get better at it, whatever. And I responded to him. And then, by the time I turned around, I realized that we had been kind of like going back and forth, DMing, just texting each other in the app, and didn't think anything of it. It was really nothing. But I was just like, okay. And after a point, I realized something that felt a little bit different about this particular person and this particular situation. And then when I looked, it had been like an hour and a half, and we've been talking. I'm like, wait a minute, this is crazy. Now, mind you, this is a Friday night, and typically I'm out on the town, either out at a restaurant or a bar with some friends, or on a plane traveling somewhere, or at some local destination, or somewhere around the world. But I happened to be home, and we were having this great conversation, totally platonic. And then there was a point where I was like, something feels different. Something feels very different. And I remember saying to him, I said, this is going to sound really strange, but does this feel weird to you? And he said, how do you mean? And I said, I don't know, but this just feels very different. Like, one, I don't normally talk to people in DM on Instagram. And he said, no. And then I built up the courage. I said, you know what? Question. Are you gay? And he said, well, I don't like to put labels on it, but if you want to, yes, I'm gay. And I said, well, okay, I'm bisexual. That was the first time I actually ever came out to someone and said that, and even kind of had that type of conversation. And I remember saying to myself at that very moment, I said, God, whatever this is, please allow me to be open to it. And the moment I said that, the trajectory of that conversation changed. The trajectory of my life changed. The trajectory of our lives were intertwined. And we just spoke for another couple of hours. We started around 9 o'clock. And when I got off of Instagram with him, it was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I found my person. I knew by the end of that conversation, I found my person. And I said to him, I said, let's exchange the numbers, which we did. And then I remember telling him, I'll call you in the morning. And he was like, okay. And, later I found out that he said that thinking that, well, I would just never call, but I actually did. Like I said, we got off the phone around 2, and I remember calling him, because I don't even think I slept that night, around 7 o'clock in the morning. And he was shocked that I actually called. And I will just say this, from that morning on, Ronald and I have been inseparable. We've been joined at the hip since January 19th of 2019. So, as of this recording, it has been 3+ years, almost 4 years since we've been married, 5 years since we've been together. And I never, ever would have imagined that, one, I would have found my person on a social media app and, not even looking, not even trying, and just being blessed with this man in my life. Now, that is the beginning of this journey. So, in life, there are always these moments, these full circle moments that we all experience. And I have to say that February 2nd was a full circle moment for me. Now, I went to school in Philadelphia, grew up in New York, went to school in Philadelphia, lived in Philadelphia for many years before I moved back to New York for a job in the early 2000s. So, February 2nd, 2019, Ronald and I decided that we were going to meet up in Philadelphia. Now, mind you, he lives in Delaware and I was living in New York. And I said, all right, Philadelphia's a great, middle ground to meet. And, I was very familiar with the city, and I loved Philly. It always holds a special place on my heart for me. We met, and, the last time I had a same-sex relationship or had any type of relations with someone of the same sex was when I lived in Philadelphia. And that was 20-something plus years ago. And here I am, February of 2019, meeting the person who will become my future husband in Philly. Full circle moment. He picked me up from the train station, from 30th Street Station, and that weekend was a whirlwind. We had an amazing time. We stayed at a great hotel right on the Ben Franklin Parkway. Had an amazing dinner. Went to the top of Liberty Place. Just walked the city. Enjoyed each other's company. And I tell you this, we met up on a Friday evening, left each other on a Sunday, and did not want to leave. And could not wait for the next time that we would meet again. And, I wanted every and any opportunity to come down to be with this person, to spend time with this person, because I knew that was my person. And I knew this in less than 2 weeks. So let's fast forward. A week later, before I even left, Ronald asked me if I would like to come down, because Valentine's was the following week, and he had some friends that were having a Valentine's get-together. And he said, hey, it's all gay couples. And, I thought about it, and I was just like, relatively quickly, because I have never been out there. Like I said, the first relationship that I had was very hush-hush, very quiet, and, it was very hidden. This time I knew that this had to be different. I knew that this was my person, and I was not going to hide for too long about him. So I said, okay, I'll come down. So I booked a ticket, took the train. And this time I came down to Delaware, came down to where he was. And, so Ronald and I at this point had been dating for almost 4 weeks. And he picks me from the train station, and, we get back to his place and we're kind of relaxing, whatever. And he gets a phone call. it's his parents saying, "Oh, hey, we're in the area and we're just going to stop by." And he's like, "Okay." So he turns to me and says, "My parents are not in the area. They just nosy. They heard I was dating someone. They knew that that person was going to be here this weekend. And they wanted basically to meet me." Now, this is a lot going on within this short weekend. I came down on a Friday and I was leaving that Sunday. His parents came. I was introduced to them, got a chance to know them, and love my in-laws. Could not ask for better family to marry into. But, so not only was I going to an event where it was all gay couples, now meeting my future in-laws, which I didn't know at the time. And it was just a lot going on, a lot of letting people know who I was, letting them see me for who I truly was, which I had never done. And it was like these big steps I was taking. And it felt good. It felt freeing. It felt like I felt light and I felt energetic. And it just felt good to be with someone and not have to lie, not have to hide who I was. So, funny story, we go to this event with a bunch of, like I said, older gay men. They have all been together for years. A few of them were married, and a few of them, had been dating for a long time. And here comes Ronald and I. We'd only been dating for about 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks. And there was this one game where it was about how well do you know your partner? Ask a bunch of questions. We all had to write them down. Lo and behold, at the end of the game, Ronald and I won. We got every question right. Mind you, we'd only been dating for 3 weeks, and there were people there that were married for years that were getting like really simple questions about your partner wrong. And everyone looks at us and say, "Well, damn, how long have you guys been together?" And we said 3 weeks. They were shocked. And actually, so were we. But I think what my point in telling this story is that, one, we both listened to one another when we were speaking. We fully grasped all the things about each other. And we took full advantage of the time that we had to really learn and to study one another. So not only were we able to, really show people who we were and just be out and have fun and be free and just be ourselves, we were starting to do the things that just normal couples do, at least for me, because these are the things that I had never experienced. We traveled. I remember our first getaway or trip was to Chicago. I had been to Chicago many times and I just love the city. And he had said he had, always wanted to experience going to Chicago. I said, "Okay, well, let's just go." We booked a ticket, went around Easter time. So we figured it'd be a little bit warmer. It was a little cool, but we had such an amazing experience. And for me, just to be able to be out with him, out in public, having a meal, walking along the river, doing boat tours. And it's not even just about going out, but being able to express ourselves freely, hold hands, hug, give a kiss here and there, and just be a couple in the world and be seen and to feel safe. That was so cathartic. It was so needed. And it was, I think, what I was wanting all my life. And I finally had that thing that eluded me for so long. Now, we had those first few months where we were just really just about ourselves and having those moments. And I was coming down to Delaware and we were dating and just having such an amazing time. And I remember a moment when I came down to Philadelphia, not to see him, but to come and visit an old friend of mine, someone I went to college with, a really good friend. We were friends since freshman year of college. And the funny thing is that I didn't even like her at first because I thought that she was kind of full of herself, but we became best of friends and we stayed in touch after college. We actually worked at the same office for a while until I moved to New York. And, years could go by and we really probably didn't talk for a while, but whenever we did meet up, it was like we picked up where we left off. So I remember reaching out to her and saying, hey, I'm going to be free this Friday. I'm going to come down to Philly. How about we go out, grab some lunch and just have a good, just catch up. She was like, okay. I remember going to Philly, meeting up with her at the office, and it's an office where I used to work. So I walked around and saw some old friends and colleagues that I hadn't seen in years. And then we went out to lunch. She found a really cute restaurant not too far from the office. And I remember going in and we're just talking, and she's married and has a beautiful son. And I remember her relationship was a whirlwind. She met her husband on vacation, and within a month, actually 3 months, she had been married, and then less than a year, she had gotten pregnant and had a baby. We're talking, and she kind of like leans over to me. She's like, hey, are you seeing anybody? Are you in love? What's going on? And I remember saying to myself in that very moment, I was just like, you know what? I am not going to lie. For the first time in my life, in a long time, I can honestly say that I am truly happy. I am in love. I'm on cloud 9, and I'm not going to deny this person or deny myself that feeling. And I said to her, I said, I'm happy. I'm seeing someone. His name is Ronald, and I'm deeply in love with him. And I remember she looked at me and she just started to cry. And then once her waterworks were let loose, I was a mess. We both started crying. And it wasn't crying for me, quote unquote, coming out or letting her in. It was tears of joy that I was happy and I was able to pronounce that love and happiness publicly. And I remember people in the restaurant kind of like looking at us like, oh my God, is he breaking up with her? What's going on over there? But we had a great boohoo, and then we had a great conversation afterwards. She was the first person that I told that I knew that, hey, this is who I am, and this is who I'm in love with, and this is my life. And she was just so happy for me, and I was ecstatic. And I never had any anticipation or any doubt that she'd be happy for me. But I think that I built up all these years that people would look at me differently if they found out and knew who I truly was. So that was like June of 2019. Fast forward, I believe it was July, back in New York, back in my office where I was working at the time. Had another coworker, a really good friend. We had become friends over the years, and we always go out to lunch and just kind of hang out after work and do things socially. And we had decided we were going to go to this new restaurant that was on Park Avenue. It was a Thai place. We love Thai food. And we went. We sat closer to the back, off in the corner, one of those high top tables. And we talk all the time in the office, but a lot of times we talk about like electronics and Apple, because like that was our thing. But every once in a while, she just randomly asked me, hey, are you seeing anybody? Whatever. Just making general conversation. And again, I said to myself, you know what? I am not going to lie. I said, I'm extremely happy and just thankful for who I have in my life. And I want people to know. And I said to her, yeah. I said, I am seeing someone. His name is Ronald, and I am so in love with this man. And she was just like, oh my God, I'm so happy for you. And, we ended up spending the rest of the conversation just talking about, how we met and where we've been and what we're doing and the plan is and this and that. And it was just such an amazing feeling to be able to just talk freely about the person that I was with and how I felt about this person. So I had a summer of letting a few people in, and I would say self-discovery of knowing that, hey, I can do this. I can let people in and let people know who I really was and not be afraid to show that other side of me, because I believe showing that other side completes the full package of who Chris Edwards really is. So with that being said, I knew that there was one person that I had to tell. I couldn't go any further. I had to let my mom know. But it wasn't going to be as easy as I thought it could be. So I made that realization, I would say, in early September. And I did not want to end the year. Actually, I did not even want my birthday to come around before I told her. My birthday did kind of come and pass, but I told her right after my birthday. And my birthday is in November. I remember, just me battling internally with having to tell my mom. It was all those years of that pent up, well, how's she going to react? How's everyone going to react? Like, granted, I'm a grown adult. I can take care of myself, lived on my own, did my own thing. But regardless of what, we always want our parents, our mothers, to love us unconditionally. And when, I thought that if she found out that I was gay or bi, not that she wouldn't love me, but she would look at me differently. And my mother and I have a great relationship, and I did not want to, ruin the relationship that we had. I thought that if she knew that maybe things would change. So December 3rd rolls around. My birthday had passed in November, and I said I have to tell her. One, because I had planned on spending Christmas with Ronald. There was no way around it. I knew I was going away for Christmas, and we were going to spend our first Christmas together, because this is who I wanted to be with. Came home, had dinner. I said, hey, I need to talk to you. I went into her room and I sat down and I looked at her and I said, I'm gay. And the tears just started to flow, started to bawl like uncontrollably. And she said, stop. She said, you are my son. I love you, and nothing's ever going to change that. And just hearing those words was like 42 years of weight, of pain, of struggle, of strife just lifted off of my back. I felt as though I was, for lack of better words, I was reborn that day. I was the person I was meant to be in that very moment. I got the acceptance that I so longed for. I didn't even realize I did. My mother and I had a great conversation that we sat there for a couple of hours just talking, and I knew that this was going to be a journey. I was going to have to educate her, educate myself, and then this was the beginning of the road, because now that I've told her, I've got to let everyone else know. Not only did, I tell her who I was, and I used the word gay to make it easier for her to understand. Like I said, I identify as a bisexual man, but to make it easier for everyone, in the beginning, I just let people know, say, hey, I'm gay, just so, because I think people have a better understanding of that and can identify with that terminology. Fast forward, I told my mom December 3rd that, hey, this is who I am. This is who I'm with. I introduced her to Ronald. It was, an adjustment. It took about, a couple of weeks for everything to really kind of settle down. And I remember, having long conversations with my mom throughout those first couple of weeks, reassuring her, her reassuring me, and just, like I said, educating her and letting her know really who Chris Edwards really was. So fast forward from December 3rd, after Christmas, and after Christmas, Ronald and I had spent that first Christmas together. We had an amazing time, and I just knew that this was my guy. Came back from holiday with him in Delaware. I think it was like, I want to say like the 2nd or 3rd of January. So I spent New Year's with him as well. And then I came back 2 weeks later. And 2 weeks later, I remember it was a Sunday and we were getting ready to go out somewhere, probably out to dinner or somewhere. And we were sitting on the bed. I was sitting on the bed getting ready. And I turned to him and I said, babe, let's get married. He turned to me and said, okay. And I turned to him and said, okay. And we decided we were going to get married. I came back later that week and we went to the courthouse and got our marriage license. But we had to wait a week to actually get married because we decided we're just going to go to the Justice of Peace, get married. There's no reason for us to wait. We know we want to be with each other. And we're trying to figure out all the logistics as far as like, I'm eventually going to have to move because the cost of living is much cheaper in Delaware. So this is where we're going to call home base. Went back to New York and said, yeah, I'm getting married. I'm getting married next week. I knew my mom wasn't going to be able to be there. And to be honest with you, I just kind of really wanted it to be him and I. His parents did come because they lived in Delaware as well. And his sister and a cousin came. You only need one witness. And I ended up having 2 friends that lived in Philadelphia come and be my witnesses. And, you know, January 31st, we got married in 2020. I was going back and forth between between New York and Delaware. And then, of course, March comes around. Came down like I normally do every other week. Because at the time we were still living apart. We hadn't made the full move yet. And COVID. And I will have to say, you know, despite the traumatic event that COVID was for the world, COVID was a blessing for me and for Ronald. We were locked down together. We were able to really get to know one another even more and just live in the same space. And I will say COVID was a blessing. We had such an amazing time during lockdown and the experiences and just the time together, and just loved every moment of it. I wouldn't change a thing. Now during lockdown, one of the things that I started to do was let all my family and friends in. You know, I was doing the whole Zoom thing with people, calling people and letting them know. I was doing like group Zooms. Like I got on a Zoom with all the cousins, got on the Zoom with like aunts and uncles, and friends. And basically I would just leave like, hey, got some news. I'm married and I'm married to a man. And that's exactly how I did it. And, you know, the reaction and the responses that I got totally blew me away. You know, like I said, even from my mom, like the built up in my mind of how people are going to react to me, you know, not being quote unquote this heterosexual man, was not what I thought it was going to be. The response that I got from everyone off the bat was, are you happy? And once they knew I was happy, oh, we're happy for you. And, you know, I'd introduce them to Ronald. And it was like these people just welcomed him in like he had been a part of the family for decades. I mean, my parents love this man. I would even say they love him more than they love me, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. But a lot of times I believe, I'm a true believer in this. I think that we build up things in our heads of how we think things are going to go. And a lot of times that's not the actual truth. I think that if you allow people in and give them the opportunity to see who you are, because they know you, they're going to love you regardless. We live in a different time and age right now. Yes, there's a lot of negativity out there, but we live in a different world. And we live in a world where we can be ourselves. We can be our authentic selves, you know? That means so much to me now, to be able to live in this space, to live in this place where I can just be me, live freely, love who I love unconditionally without any restriction or borders, that's meaningful. That is meaningful. I am living my life out loud now. Loud and proud, as they would say. I don't put restrictions on myself. I come on social media, I come on these platforms, and I hope that by me telling my story gives people or someone else the courage to live their life authentically, to be who they were meant to be unapologetic, to be unafraid. And, the reason for doing Safe Space is to give people in the Caribbean community, people of Caribbean descent, that freedom to be themselves. You say, Caribbeans aren't any different than other people. Yes, that's true. But there's something to be said about the community. Right now, there are laws in the book in the Caribbean where it's illegal to love someone who is of the same sex as you. That has to change. I'm doing this with the hope that people find the strength, not for anyone else, but for themselves, to be themselves. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to listen to my story. I hope that you found it informative and or inspirational. I hope you see yourself in my story and have the courage to be your authentic self. I hope you have the courage to be yourself for yourself and no one else. Letting people into your life is not for others, it's for you. Each week, I'm going to bring you another great guest who has a unique story to share. I hope you walk away learning something about that individual and something about yourself. Until next time, my friends, be kind to others, be gentle to yourself, and maintain a safe space. Have a good one. Thanks for watching this show on Indecent Media. Now, if you're watching here on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and hit the notification button so that you can get notified when we drop new videos every week. See you guys next time.